is the U.S. foreign policy. And as we mentioned before, that I think we all agree that the United States is still the most powerful country in the world today. And its foreign policy is related with almost every country, especially the countries that depend on the U.S. for the security protection, like Taiwan. So in today's class, we will review the process of the development of U.S. foreign policy and try to analyze its fundamental principles or basic logics. So at the beginning, I think we can check the geographic environment of the United States first. So there is a map. Please do me a favor, just check the map and try to find the some significance from it. What have you found? This is a map of not just the United States, this is a map of the North America continent, right? So if you watch that carefully now, you will see the first thing is the North America is a very vast continent, right? Vast and rich, unlike the place like Siberia. And the other thing is the east side and the west side of the United States is oceans. The Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean can help the U.S. government to isolate the troubles from Europe and Asia. And the north side and the south side of the United States is two middle-sized countries. This is Canada, right, and Mexico. They are the middle-sized country and very friendly to the United States and have very deep relations with Washington. So, in general, we can say that the United States is a very lucky country. It has almost no security threat in the region it right in. Right? So this situation might make some countries on the Eurasian continent be very envious, such as China, the country that's surrounded by India, Russia, and Japan. So now let's check how the United States sees itself. There are three basic beliefs that the U.S. holds since its founding. The first one is the idea of the New World, which means the United States considers itself as a whole new world, different from the Europe. They think the Europe is an old world. So which means the founder of the United States tried to isolate the fears from those European countries and keep the political distance, and they can build a brand new world in the North America continent. And the second one is the manifest destiny, which means is the founder of the United States, they believe the reason that they can leave Europe and find this North America, this vast and rich continent, is all because of the guidance of God. So which means the United States is the country that chosen by God and which is destined to lead the world. And the third one is the exceptionalism. Considering that the United States is the only country that has established the democratic system and the value of human rights protection since its founding. So most of the American people, they have some kind of superiority. They think they are special, they think they are better than other countries, and they think they have some kind of moral obligation to promote democracy in the international community. So even impose their value on other countries is also accepted. And I think the best example to explain how those beliefs to affect the U.S. foreign policy is the Monroe Doctrine. I think you may read that before when you in high school. Monroe Doctrine was proposed by James Monroe, the fifth president of the United States. And President Monroe declared that the United States will not allow any European countries to interfere in the regional affairs of the American continent. Here's the actual word he used. The further efforts by European nations to take control of any independent state in North or South America will be viewed as the manifestation of an unfriendly disposition toward the United States. So we can say the Monroe Doctrine is a milestone to the U.S. foreign policy. There are three important meanings of it. The first one is to declare publicly the national status of the United States as a regional leader and define the American continent as its sphere of influence. And the second one is to oppose any European countries to invade or colonize any part of the American continent, showing the intention to keep the political distance from the European countries. And the third one is showing the separated policy attitude, which means the U.S. government, they oppose any European countries to develop the political influence in American continent, but they're still willing to do the business of cooperation with them. You know, the American Civil War, which is one of the most important things, happened in the United States after its founding, right? And the story you might heard before, which is this war was caused by the issue of black slaves, right? And who's this guy? Who's this man? President Lincoln, right? President Lincoln, who is an advocate of the human rights protection, and he led the northern states to defeat the southern state and free all the slaves. What I'm going to say is the origins of this war is a little bit complicated than we read before. In essence, the American Civil War is a confrontation between two different economic systems and political value. The industrial capitalism and the value of human rights protection that represents by the federal government and northern states, and the manner economy and the tradition of slaves that represents by southern states. And although this is a very brutal war, but there still have some positive meaning of it. And the first one is to accelerate the process of political centralization, which means this war has strengthened the authority of the federal government, and of course that is a good thing for the United States. And the second thing is the American Civil War has once again to confirm the value of this country, which is democracy and human rights protection, and which is also helpful for the national unity. And the third thing is this war has promoted the progress of military technology. There are so many new weapons has been invented. And after the Civil War, control the southern state directly, and they can direct the economic energy that created by the industrial capitalism there. And so we can see there is a positive economic cycle has been established, which means the land development from the north to the southern state will lead the transportation infrastructures and mining development to the southern states. And those things will support the industrial manufacturing and mass production and eventually cause the economic prosperity. And this situation will create a new energy for the next phase of land development. We know that the United States has participated in the World War I and become the winning side, right? And one of the most important reasons of this war, one of the most important results of this war is promoting the process of transformation to the United States from a regional power to international great power. So there are two main reasons of that. The first reason is the traditional great powers like Britain, France, or Germany, no matter they are the winners or losers of World War I, their national power has all been weakened. So the rising United States can just fill the gap of the power structure in the international politics. And the second reason is the US government has not just participated in the World War I, they also play an important role, which is the arms factory. In the early period of the World War I, the US has produced and sold a large number of weapons to the European countries and obtained substantial profits. However, Washington doesn't, interested in being the leader of Western civilization or international community. There is an obvious signal, which is the US Congress has rejected the proposal of joining the League of Nations. And the reason for that is the thoughts of isolationism was very popular in the American society after the World War I, which means most of the American people, they are not interested in joining the international affairs because they think that will waste the financial resources and force the United States to involved in the war, which are related with its national interest eventually. Do you know this guy? Franklin Roosevelt, President Roosevelt. Yeah, I mean when the U.S. people they are still enjoying the winning the World War I and the economic prosperity in their society, almost no one has noticed that there has dangerous signals already appeared of the overheating economy. So the serious economic crisis happened in 1929. The stock market, Wall Street, was collapsed, and the entire country was going to a serious recession, and lots of people lose their jobs. President Roosevelt, who took office in 1933, was proposed a blueprint of policy named the New Deal, which with three major objectives: relief, reform, and recovery. President Roosevelt announced that he will lead the United States out of depression. However, also the idea of the New Deal has received a lot of attention from the media, but objectively speaking, it's not worked very well. However, the development of the international relations has bring the opportunity for the United States again, which is the outbreak of the World War II. If you look at history, you will see the political elites from the European countries, they want to declare that they will do anything to prevent the tragic war like World War I happen again. Unfortunately, their efforts wasn't work because of the dissatisfaction of the international arrangement after the World War II or the ambitions of extensions. The Axis power, including Germany, Italy, and Japan, has launched the large-scale aggression after 1937. And one of the interesting things is, in the early period of World War II, the U.S. government tried to remain neutral, and they try to be, do the same thing, being the arms factory. They produce a lot of weapons and sell to the European countries, sell to their allies, and the profit that obtained by through the arms deal supported the economic recovery and end of the time of depression. However, after the United Kingdom and France were defeated by Germany very quickly, Washington started to consider to participate in this war in order to prevent Hitler control the whole Europe. And considering most of the American people still not interested to join the World War II because they think this war is unrelated with the United States. So that means President Roosevelt needed a very good reason to convince people, convince his voters. So the attack of Pearl Harbor, anyone know what I'm talking about? Pearl Harbor. Okay. The attack of Pearl Harbor is a perfect reason to convince American people, because which is the first time the United States has been attacked by other countries after the War of Independence. So President Roosevelt decided to seize the chance. After the attack happened, he declared the U.S. will join the war and work with its allies to defeat Axis powers. And World War II is a crucial moment for the United States to be the international great power, because during the process to participate in the European War and the Pacific War at the same time, the U.S. government has established the alliance system with a lot of countries on the Eurasian continent, such as Republic of China, like Japan, like other countries. And so the U.S. government has gradually construct a network of worldwide security cooperation and become the real leader of the international community. And we know the world didn't become more peaceful after the end of World War II, but just entered in the Cold War almost immediately, right? And we know the Cold War was a very, very strange war. The United States and the Soviet Union, they confront each other not only because of the power struggle, but also because of the disagreement of ideology, which is the difference between communism and capitalism, right? Fortunately, because of the affection of mutual assured destruction, which caused by the nuclear weapons, which means the U.S. government and Moscow, they worried that if we have a military warfare directly, then we will use the nuclear weapon to attack each other eventually, and that means the destroying of the world. So they try to confront each other through some peaceful ways, such as diplomatic competition and proxy war. And the United States has took the leadership responsibility in the Cold War without a moment of hesitation. In fact, President Truman was declared that the U.S. will play a role as a world cop to against the communist revolution that appeared around the world. However, the strategic objective of the United States in the Cold War is not defeat the Soviet Union. What the U.S. want to do is contain it, because of some American strategists, they believe to confront with a superpower like the Soviet Union is stupid, is unwise. So what the United States should do is to contain it from the European side and ASEAN side, and try to consume its economic resources by the tactics like arms race, and give a thought to the effective economic system of the Soviet Union. Washington believes this strategy of content will create some troubles for Moscow and help the U.S. Win the Cold War eventually. So this video shows that the dictatorship of Stalin is one of the reasons that caused the Cold War. And allow me to remind you, beside the United States and the Soviet Union, China is also an important player in the Cold War too. And as a communist country, of course, China was the loyal supporter of the Soviet Union and communism. But American strategists, they still believe the relationship between China and the Soviet Union might change in the near future because of three reasons. The first one is the difference between China and the Soviet Union in terms of ideology. The Soviet Union is the real believer of communism, but China, they just want to beautify the dictatorship of Mao Zedong in the name of communism, which is totally different. And the second reason is, if you look back at history, in history, China has always been the most powerful country in East Asia. So the dignity of a traditional great power will not allow it to follow the Soviet Union for too long. And the third reason is there still have some unsolved territorial disputes between China and Soviet Union. So those stuff could cause the friction between those two countries. For those considerations, the US government tried to maintain the communication with mainland China. Even these two countries wants to confront each other directly in the Korean War. But they still try to keep the dialogue approach with Beijing. And the above prediction was correct. The Sino-Soviet relation has rapidly deteriorated after 1950s. Moscow decided to terminate the assistance of nuclear technology and economy to China. As a response, Beijing also canceled the proposal of Sino-Soviet naval cooperation. Meanwhile, the relation between China and the United States is keep improving, and those two countries eventually decide to establish some kind of informal security cooperation after 1970s. So you can see there is the U.S. President Nixon. He visited China and reached some consensus with Mao Zedong in terms of the national defense strategy. So we can say the U.S. wants to get the important preponderance in the competition with the Soviet Union through successfully reconstruct the strategic triangle during the Cold War. Okay, the Cold War was ended up, I think, at the end of 1992. And after the Cold War, the United States has entered its heyday, which became the most powerful country in the world, a real hegemony. Washington wants to demonstrate its strong military power to the world through defeating the Iraq in the First Gulf War very quickly. And at the same time, the U.S. economy is kept to grow up because of the rise of the computer industry. There has some young and powerful new companies is emerging, like Apple Computer, like Microsoft. And President Clinton, the Clinton administration, who took office in 1993, decided to participate in international affairs actively, and they tried to manage the situation in Central and East Europe through NATO, the North Atlantic Organization, a treaty organization, in order to fill the gap of power that led by the Soviet Union. And the priority of the foreign policy of the Clinton administration is to promote the trends of globalization and democratization, because it believed democracy will make the world much more peaceful. Now, the theory of democratic peace is very popular in the United States. People believe democracy is a good thing and will make the world better. This theory has two major assumptions. The first one is the basic principle of democracy is solving disputes by some peaceful ways, such like communication or coordination instead of violent conflict. So theoretically, the democratic country will also try to solve the international disputes through the way like diplomatic negotiation instead of launching a war. The second assumption of the theory is theoretically the leader of democratic country will concern their approval rating which is relevant with the survival of regime. And considering launching a war, or even worse, you failing in a war, is lethal to the survival of regime. So usually the democratic country is reluctant to launch a war. The heyday of the United States was end very soon after entering the 21st century because of the outbreak of one important terror attack you may have heard before, which is 9/11 terror attack. And after terror attack, everything has changed. The U.S. launched a war in the name of counter-terrorist, which is a strategic issue, but with the President of the United States, who took office in 2001, I think. And in the early period of the Bush administration, the U.S. foreign policy's priority is balancing China. In a high-level policy document named National Security Strategy, the Bush administration referred China as a strategic competitor, which declared that China's rise will seriously jeopardize the stability of Asia-Pacific and the national security of the United States. And you can imagine the above description will deteriorate the Sino-American relations. But the outbreak of 9/11 terror attack has changed everything. I think some of you still remember this incident, and some of you wasn't born when this terror attack happened, right? So that's the Pentagon, the Department of Defense of the United States, also being attacked in 9/11 incident. So the 9/11 terror attack has forced the Bush administration to give up their plan to balance China. And President Bush launched the global war on terror, which means the United States worked with other countries to counter terrorists. And the first step of this war is to overthrow the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, which has been accused of supporting Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And in the early period of the global war on terror, the U.S. has received a lot of support from other countries, including China. But what Bush administration wants is more than that. Some members of the Bush administration, they think the United States should, seize the chance and to overthrow the other strategic enemy in the Middle East, which is Iraq, leading by President Saddam Hussein. And in their imagination, the United States can easily defeat Afghanistan and Iraq and reconstruct these two countries as a brand new demonstration of democracy. And the neighboring country will be attracted and to follow. So the domino effect of democracy will happen in the Middle East. For those considerations, President Bush eventually decided to launch the Iraq War in 2003 in the name of counter-terrorism. Unfortunately, the domino effect that the Bush administration expected wasn't happen. Although the U.S. Army indeed defeat Iraq and Afghanistan very quick, however, the process of reconstructing democracy was surprisingly difficult. And because of the terrorists in those two countries cannot be entirely eliminated, so the US Army has to stay there for long term. At the same time, the international community started to criticize the US government because they are unable to approve the connection between Iraq and terrorism, which means the legitimacy of Iraq war has been questioned. And some scholars also indicate that the other thing is that caused by the global war on terror is the disregard of the United States to the Asia-Pacific, which gives a chance to China to rise. In fact, the Chinese government referred this situation as a term that the period of strategic opportunity, which is the opportunity that China must be seized. So after the 9/11 terror attack happened, the Chinese government tried to extend its diplomatic influence in East Asia by using their economic power or promoting the military capability. And you can imagine the diplomatic presence of the United States in East Asia as being marginalized. And the worst thing is, because of the massive expense of the global war on terror and the lack of supervision of financial affairs, which finally caused the financial tsunami at the end of 2008, the stock market collapsed again, and lots of the American people lose their job. And just like the things that happened before in the 1929. Who's this guy? Barack Obama, right? I think it's a politician with a press company. Barack Obama, the former president of the United States who took office in 2009, wants to propose the slogan change, and he promised American people that he will lead U.S. to out of the depression. And the priority of the foreign policy of the Obama administration is Asia Pacific, because it believed by promoting the engagement with Asian countries can help the United States deal with the problem from in terms of economy and diplomacy. So in terms of diplomacy, the Obama administration tried to contain China. So it proposed a new strategy named rebalancing. So he tried to contain China through the way like reinforcing the traditional bilateral alliance with Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and Australia. And meanwhile, the US government is also trying to interfere in the maritime disputes between China and its neighboring countries. And in terms of economy, the Obama administration is trying to expand the export to Asian countries in order to improve the terrible economy in the United States and increasing the employments. So President Obama wants to propose the idea of TPP. Some of you might have heard that before, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Initiative, which invited the countries in this region to work with the United States to organize a high-level free trade area. Unfortunately, when the Obama administration was, trying to promote the engagement in East Asia, the threat of terrorists appeared again. ISIS, which rose in the second term of the Obama administration, was a very special, very aggressive terrorist organization. This organization used the chaos that caused by the civil war in Syria to rise and occupied a well-defined land in the Middle East, including part of Syria and part of Iraq. And as you know, ISIS has launched several terror attacks to the Western countries. I think the most well-known one is the terror attack that happened in Paris in 2015. And I have to say, ISIS is a very, very special terrorist organization which is very good to use the cyber technology. Those guys know how to use the social media like Facebook, Twitter, to promote their idea and attract people to follow them. Meanwhile, they also know how to use the virtual currency like bitcoins to buy the things, the resource materials they need online. And so you can see the threats of ISIS was caused the highly concern of the United States and its allies. So President Obama decided to launch a new counter-terrorist war in the Middle East again, but this time the US decided to work that with the multiple cooperation. Presidential election of the United States in 2016 was unexpected. In fact, most of the media in that time, they predict Hillary Clinton, who used to serve as a Secretary of State in the first term of Obama administration, will win the election and become the first female president of the United States. And who knows, the eventual winner is Donald Trump, a very controversial entrepreneur with almost no political experience. And considering the fickle personality of Donald Trump, and he never served as a congressman or chief of the government, so it is extremely hard for the people to predict the foreign policy preference of the new president, Donald Trump. And besides, considering President Trump wants to propose some radical and realistic ideas during the campaign, such he announced that he will build a beautiful wall on the boundary between Mexico and the United States. So you can imagine that the international community is very worried about the prospect of the United States. Okay, although President Trump proposed the slogan like "Make America Great Again" or "America First," but if you look at the situation that happened after 2017, basically we can say the Trump administration has accepted the strategic view from its predecessor, which means President Trump tried to continues to promote the engagement with Asian countries. So that's why President Trump wants to propose the idea of an Indo-Pacific strategy in 2017, which means the United States will try to promote its diplomatic presence in Asia-Pacific by working with the traditional allies, partners, and new partners such as India together, and adjusting the military deployment in this region. And there are two major challenges in the blueprint of President Trump's foreign policy. The first one is North Korea. I think you will remember that Kim Jong-un wants to express his unfriendly disposition toward the United States by launching a lot of missiles and holding the nuclear experience for several times. And when people start to worry about if there will the war will outbreak between the United States and North Korea, amazing things happen. The Kim Jong-un and President Trump they held the historical summit in Singapore and showing the goodwill to each other. Although the North Korean government doesn't declare officially to give up their nuclear project, but you can see the atmosphere in Korean Peninsula has been eased. In terms of China, President Trump and his administration also regard China as a strategic competitor. So he chose to reinforce the U.S. Army, the deployment of the U.S. Army in East Asia, especially in Japan, and try to interfere the maritime dispute around China, such like the East China Sea disputes and the South China Sea disputes. And meanwhile, the President Trump also launched a trade war on China by increasing tariffs. Okay, so based on the above discussion, we can see there are three basic features of the foreign policy of the United States. The first one I would like to say is the confusion between internationalism or isolationism. Those are two different thoughts. The question is, should the United States open the door and participate in international affairs, manage the order and the peace of the international community, even that will consume its national resources? Or should the United States just close the door, just take care of itself, and ignore the things that happen in other countries? Those are two different thoughts. So if you look back at history, sometimes the U.S. seems to, they just took the leadership responsibility and played a role as a world cops, such as the rebalancing challenge that proposed by President Obama. But sometimes some American people, they seem more prefer to close the door and focus on the domestic affairs, such as what President Trump referred to, make America great again. We only care about the thing that happened in the United States. So those are two different, very different views, and confused the United States for a long time. Okay, the second feature of the U.S. foreign policy is the confusion between two different theories, which is the democratic peace or the theory of cultural diversity. What that means is, as we mentioned before, that the theory of democratic peace has a lot of fans in the United States. American people, the political elites there, they believe democracy is a good thing and will make the world better. However, they think that democracy is a good thing. So that explains why in history the U.S. government has always tried to promote democracy in the international community, and sometimes they will do things by overthrowing some authoritarian regime. But some scholars indicated that some countries, not every country's traditional culture and political environment are suitable for democracy. So that means if you overthrow some dictators without serious considerations, then it will cause some tragic consequences. I think the most convincing example is the Iraq and Afghanistan. Those two countries was defeated by the United States, and the Bush administration tried to reconstruct them as a new democratic demonstration, but those two countries wasn't being more stable or more peaceful. So I think maybe sometimes the United States has to admit democracy maybe not suitable for every country. Okay, the last confusion is about China. As you know, China is the largest undemocratic country in the world today. So China's rising economic and military power has caused the anxiety in the United States. But I have to say, no matter how many disputes between the United States and China, you have to admit that China is different from the Soviet Union. The interdependence between those two countries is very deep. So how to work with China, how to face the challenges that caused by China, the country that neither friend nor enemy, which is the toughest issues for the US government in the 21st century. You see, we need to put. We know the next presidential election of the United States will hold in 2020, and we have no idea if President Trump can get his second term. So if President Trump loses the election, that means there will have a new president and new foreign policy of the United States, and we'll see what happens. The above is the things we are going to, I want to talk with you today. So thank you for your attention. Class dismissed.